Hey there, this is Natalie, and since Dragon Maid has been trending on Twitter, and not for any good reasons like a Season 3 announcement, I'm feeling compelled to do another semi-rant type video. It probably doesn't actually matter what sparked the latest flood of vehemently anti-Dragon Maid stuff on Twitter, but just for the sake of completeness, apparently it started when somebody compared Dragon Maid to a Western cartoon called Owl House, which I haven't seen and don't know much about, but which a lot of you told me in comments on my High Guardian Spice video was pretty good. But Twitter people became enraged that the Japanese filth that is Dragon Maid was being compared to this, from the sounds of it, much cleaner and more wholesome American show, and then of course needed to talk about how much they don't get anything that happens in Dragon Maid. Sorry, I mean how much Dragon Maid is problematic. Now, Dragon Maid was my undisputed favourite anime of the summer 2021 season, but while I was enjoying that show a ridiculous amount, I think most people in the anime community are aware of the controversies there have been around it, and the hate that it and its creator, kobayashi-san, have been getting from certain corners of the internet. So in this video, I want to first look at why I think this funny show about love, friendship and acceptance ended up receiving such a strong reaction from some that in my video responding to Noralities, I said that you'd think it was the bastard offspring of Redo of Healer and A Clockwork Orange. But then I want to look at some of the most controversial aspects of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, Kana, Iloilo and Lukoa, and talk about why I don't really think the hatred is deserved. So, to begin with, how did Dragon Maid end up being on the receiving end of so much outrage in the first place? Yes, it features a lot of adult humour, and some scenarios played for comedy that you wouldn't expect to see in a Western comedy show, but it's not exactly the most edgy thing in the world. And yet, I think I've seen more people railing against Dragon Maid than against Redo of Healer. So why is this? Well, I think the reason is that a lot of people who would never know about or dream of watching something like Redo came to hear about Dragon Maid due to the deserved popularity of Season 1, and were watching it expecting it to be something different to what it is. Dragon Maid is a show centred around a Yuri romance and a found family dynamic, and it's very cute in places, the word cozy getting thrown around a lot in describing it. That description though isn't all it is. Dragon Maid is also very heavy on otaku comedy, the kind that relies on you being used to anime and otaku culture to find it funny, rather than just weird. The mangaka behind Dragon Maid, kobayashi-san, is, in my opinion, really good at combining this type of comedy with stuff that has a kind of emotional depth and heart to it. There is another anime adaptation of another kobayashi-san manga called I Can't Understand What My Husband Is Saying, which is currently 2 seasons of anime shorts, so you can watch the entire thing in about an hour, and I highly recommend you do if you like Dragon Maid. But this series, despite having none of the fantasy stuff, shows the same balance of heartwarming stuff about people trying to understand each other and get along, and adult humour. That is hilarious if you understand it, but quite likely to horrify someone less familiar with the culture he's referencing and joking about, who was just looking for a nice animated feel-good show. I think this is what happened with Dragon Maid. The target audience for the series got the comedy, but it spread outside of that audience due to its premise and overall quality, and people who wouldn't normally watch an adult comedy anime of its type felt a bit betrayed that the comfy lesbian romance they'd heard about also had, well, we'll come to what it has that they weren't expecting to see. And I think that's why these cuter comedy shows like Dragon Maid and Uzaki-chan tend to get much more of this kind of reaction than the far more racy shows out there like Shimonetta ever got. It's because there is a sense that people who like aspects of the show, but who aren't really who it's aimed at, feel like it should be different so that they can enjoy it. But when that leads to them raging at the show, its creator, the people who can and do enjoy it, anime as a concept, or even Japan itself, it's a bit ignorant. Now, of course, I can't really say all of that without actually talking about the parts of Dragon Maid those who are offended by it are offended by, and why I think that if they're taken the way they were intended, they're not really anything shocking. First, I'm going to talk about Kana. Now, I actually agree with a lot of Dragon Maid's detractors that despite being a dragon with a long lifespan, Kana is supposed to be viewed as a child. She goes to elementary school, she acts in a childlike way, and even in her dragon form, is regarded as a kid by her own species. But what I don't really agree with is that Kana is sexualized, or that the dynamic between Kana and her classmate Psychowa is inappropriate, or done for titillation rather than comedy. Kana's design is, to me, just cute and frilly, and that's the way all of the adult characters react to her. Some might say the fact she's wearing over-the-knee socks is sexual because people have been known to find those sexy, but people have also been known to find nurses' uniforms sexy, and that doesn't mean anyone who wears one is designed to turn people on. The socks are just part of that frilly, girly design in this case, and not even an odd thing for a child to wear. You'd think she was in a PVC bondage suit or something from the way some people react. Still, the thing most people who don't like the Kana scenes in Dragon Maid had a problem with were the scenes with Psychowa. Now, I do get that on the face of it, yes, it's two minors in faintly lewd scenarios, but think about what's actually happening in the story here and why it might be funny. Kids get crushes. Psychowa has a crush on Kana. Kana is oblivious to this, but Psychowa gets flustered whenever she has some kind of physical contact with Kana, or when Kana does something she finds cute. But Psychowa is a kid and can't even really conceive of anything all that lewd. She just gets flustered by being close to her crush and fantasizes about marrying her. They're never shown doing anything that would be inappropriate for kids to be doing. But when those things like playing Twister or whatever lead to her having contact with her crush, she simply reacts in a funny way. In a show for adults, most of the audience can remember the innocent crushes they had as kids on their own classmates. I mean, when I was about 7, I had a crush on this boy in my class, and I thought the height of romance was when he pulled out a loose tooth for me. The comedy in the scenes is not about kids being lewd at all. It's about Psychowa being a normal kid with a crush on Kana, and Kana, who doesn't understand humans so well yet, not really noticing. Sure, maybe some sketchy people do find it appealing for the wrong reasons, but that's the case with all kinds of stuff. My point is that I don't think that's what the intention was, or that it's weird to find those Kana scenes simply funny and cute. Next, we have Iloilo, and honestly, I'm anime only on Dragon Maid, and I didn't know what I was going to make of her before the start of the season, when pictures of her were going around from the manga. This wasn't because I'm bothered by her big old fire sacks, but because I felt like the cast was big enough already, and because her design just looked like it might be a bit too silly. But then she appeared in the anime and honestly quickly became one of my favourite characters. To me, cementing the idea that Kobayashi-san knows what he's doing. She can go from hilarious yet epic battle scenes with fire titties through to incredibly sweet storylines about missing dolls. She has really nice dynamics with other characters, and I ended up finding myself feeling a bit disappointed whenever she wasn't in an episode much. But the comical character in the comedy anime has comically large oppai, so obviously this is the devil's work. I've never really got this, as I stated in my video about Nezuko, because it's stated in the show that Iloilo is the same age as Toru, but her human form and her lack of experience with the human realm make her more equivalent to a 16-year-old. It's not weird to have boobs when you're 16, because of how biology works, and all we see with Iloilo is a cute romance with a boy about the same age. It's basically nothing, degeneracy-wise. Yet, she creates a chance to make even more boob jokes than Lucoa already provided, and they're funny. And this brings us neatly on to Lucoa herself. Again, I think the problems people have with the scenes of Lucoa and Shota are just people refusing to look at what's actually happening in the scenes, and instead just getting offended because all they see is a woman with a lewd character design glomping onto a kid who doesn't want her to. But if you consider what's actually happening here, these scenes are not sexualizing Shota or their relationship. Lucoa is a powerful goddess in the dragon world, but in the human world, she probably understands things even less than Iloilo, and yet she's enthusiastic about serving Shota, who summoned her, and her way of showing affection to him ends up being extremely inappropriate. This makes Shota very embarrassed, and the comedy comes from the awkwardness of a young boy who, like anyone his age, would find anything to do with sexuality really embarrassing, and how this contrasts with how the audience might imagine having a woman like Lucoa paying them that kind of attention would be. But because Lucoa doesn't really understand his reactions, and because she really does care about him, and because, as Shota's father said, he has a responsibility for her because he summoned her, he still comes to see her as family, no matter how embarrassing she is. It's not some sinister glorification of an adult grooming a kid, because no real person would actually behave like Lucoa, and her actions are down to just not really getting humans. It's not even a kid being shown to enjoy anything inappropriate. It's just another way the show enforces its themes of people who can't really understand each other, forming what end up being positive relationships. It's not supposed to represent a fantasy for anybody, just to create that same kind of awkward adult comedy that's actually fairly sensitive to how embarrassing anything sexual is when you're growing up. Again, it's a show for adults, for people who can remember being kids and relate to how cringe it would be to actually have had Lucoa around back then, thus getting the comedy in these scenes, while also being mature enough to see Lucoa as more than just a lewd facade, and understand why the other characters put up with her, thus getting the more wholesome aspect of her role in the show. Still, I know that no matter how much people who appreciate Dragon Maid explain the jokes or why they like it won't change the response some people will have to the series, and it won't change the strange need some people seem to have to make out the existence of Kana from Dragon Maid is a very serious problem in our world that they need to be very vocal about on Twitter, which in some way helps with something. I just wanted to talk about the way I see the characters and scenes people are offended about, and about just why this series gets so much angry attention, despite not really having anything all that shocking in it. But what do you guys think? Are all the Dragon Maid controversies just a case of the show reaching the wrong audience and people failing to try to understand the humour? Or do you think some of the criticisms aimed at the show are justified? As always, I'm interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you as always to my supporters on Patreon and to everyone who helps me out by subscribing to my channel and watching my videos. Thank you for watching this one, and I hope to see you again very soon.